do you mean?
Oh,
Is that you?
I just introduced the two gentlemen.
I just need one.
What?
I just need one
I know.
megaphone.
It seems like these are so.
All right. Great. So I'll call the meeting to order. This is the Committee of the Whole, Village of Northfield, Tuesday, September 17th. It is 5:53. Clerk, can you please call the roll?
Trustee Orth?
Here.
Trustee Whitaker?
Here.
Trustee Fowler?
Here.
Trustee Mendrick? Here. Trustee Gallen?
Here.
Trustee Dingus?
Here.
Thank you. As we start every meeting, we have a public comment period. So open then. Any comments from the public?
Before I say anything, this is mic on?
Yeah.
Okay, very
The
good.
green light is on. Just
Very
double
good,
check.
okay, well, we
great.
thought it was on last time, and it really wasn't. So my name is Karen Roth. I think I've spoken before, but I will, again, let you know that I live at 141 South Hap Road. I appreciate very much that we had the September 11th meeting, special meeting for people to come and comment. I'd like to do a little recap of that meeting and a little review for all of you. It was intended, our understanding, to be an opportunity for the public opinions to be reported and heard by everybody here. Instead, intentionally or not, many in the overflow room felt left feeling more disgruntled than when they arrived. This controlled environment of a limited capacity space only fueled the flame. There was not enough chairs. You could not see the slides, and I'll be honest with you, I just retired after 5 years of teaching college. If I had taught a remote class and my students could not see my visuals, I would not have been able to teach that class again. The material presented was, in most cases, just a rehash of what we could have read on the website, and as an afterthought, we received handouts. The scheduled 2-hour meeting, which was a promise to be a meeting that we could all have a conversation and you could hear the comments from the public, was filled with an hour and a half of the presenters. Unfortunately, 3/4 of the attendees left before they could hear the questions and comments from very well-educated, talented, experienced public who brought excellent questions to the meeting. So many never got a chance to speak, and many never got a chance to hear your responses and your comments. Again, intentionally or not, the evening lacked satisfaction and incited more confusion, and I would say a bit of a mistrust of the village board members. So before we leave tonight, it was promised, I believe, at that meeting that we would have another special meeting for the public to come. And I think we all need to know what that date is, and maybe in a venue that will accommodate the public who are interested in providing some feedback to all of you and interested in other opinions. An astute person once told me that any project or plan will fail without the buy-in of the people it most impacts. I would say Wednesday's evening was a clear evidence that the Hap Road project lacked buy-in. This board, I really believe, you underestimated the people of Northfield. The poll taken to gauge opposition to the roundabout and middle lane was brilliant, thank you. But it also sent a very clear message: we don't want them. If you did not know already, a village-wide grassroots campaign began a couple of months ago to save Hap Road. And so I'm going to make this mini announcement to the people present today, although there aren't that many, to those watching remotely, and to those who will be viewing this meeting later on YouTube. There is a movement happening now, and we have a chance to impact this project. So please go to our website, NoRoundabout.com. I was an elected officer for 8 years in a school district. Our board worked really well together, and we were able to pass 2 building improvement referendums successfully. We knew that our job was to be faithful to the people who elected us, not to outside entities. So please, I ask you, do your job for the people of Northfield. Stop the roundabout, stop the middle lane, and focus on the necessary improvements to that road. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Please.
My name's Alicia Bellar. I live on Hap Road. Last meeting last week, I presented some signed petitions. We have additional petitions, just so you know that they're still coming in, and I'll hand them to you.
Great, thank you. Anyone else?
Okay, is the mic working?
Yes, it is.
My name is Lucy Callahan, and I'm a resident and a business owner in the village. I wanted to ask you, Patrick, where you stand with our meeting with Cook County and the developer. I think it is important to say that the turnout on 9/11 speaks for itself. People are very aware and anxious to be heard. I also want to say that most people are looking for more than just a tweak or two. If you don't present an option that doesn't exclude the Hap Road expansion and the roundabout, people will be extremely disappointed. I ask that you please keep that in mind. Also, I don't think people are aware that 20 mature trees are coming down. And I just wanted to ask, hasn't Northfield been the recipient of numerous awards because of our trees? And I thought we wanted to be the comfortable corner of the North Shore. I think there has been a distinct lack of regard for the business owners, especially Metamorphosis and the homeowners on Hap. The very manner in which they were informed or not informed shows a complete lack of empathy and a lack of transparency on the part of the village, as well as a lack of professionalism. After viewing the 2040 plan, one has to wonder if it isn't part of a grand scheme. What strikes me when I look at the 2040 plan is that I see it includes a roundabout, but what I don't see are any of our small businesses. They are replaced by much larger developments. Is this what Northfield wants? Is this the Northfield that we want? Who really wants this? Certainly the current roundabout Hap Road project shows absolutely no concern for the business community or Hap Road residents. Maybe that is why certain people like this plan. Maybe it is the quickest, most direct way to get rid of existing businesses and homes. We are all for improvements being made. I want to make that very clear, but we are not for decimating our current downtown to do it. If that makes us radical, so be it. And then there's another thing I'd like to say, because I understand that my statement on 9/11 was not recorded due to technical issues. So I would like to repeat it, and I'm just going to summarize it, but in summary, I said that I thought it was a conflict of interest for a trustee to mention twice that they would buy the Metamorphosis building, not the business. At worst, it is a conflict of interest, and at best, it is a tasteless and insensitive comment. How is it proper for a trustee to invest in the village that he is entrusted to care for? How can someone who stands to profit or would like to profit possibly be impartial? The same goes for the phone campaign to round up positive emails for the project. It is not proper for someone in a leadership, custodial position to do this. I think that this trustee should recuse himself. I see this as a huge problem and wonder how and why it is allowed. Many people see this as an important infrastructure issue, but for many of us, it is our lives and our livelihood. Thank you for your fair and unbiased consideration.
Anyone else?
I always flunk at this. Okay, can you hear me? Yes or no?
Yes.
Okay, my name is Carol Ritchell, 811 Hap Road. I would like to share with our residents an email that I sent to the V group this afternoon. First, I would like to thank you, Barnaby, both for your diligence in attending to the 1,200-page Hap Road project document, as well as for your comments upon having read that document. I found those comments quite important. Secondly, I ask this board to reconsider your decision regarding the content of our board minutes. As recently as February 29th, Committee of the Whole meeting, our minutes detailed trustees' comments. To quote, see page 9 of the February 29th minutes of the meeting of the whole. Quote, Trustee Whitaker stated that he believed a fountain was a maintenance nightmare and a waste of taxpayers' money. Trustee Orth said that he originally was in favor of a fountain, but has changed his mind, and 4 more lines quoting Trustee Orth. Case in point regarding my request. I attended the August 20th Committee of the Whole meeting. At that meeting, Barnaby spoke for around 8 minutes, commenting upon having read said 1,200-page document. Absent in our minutes of that meeting is anything that Barnaby said in those 8 minutes. Below, okay, forget it. What is written in our minutes, quote, the trustees discussed that there was a Hap Road website with a lot of information. There was consensus on the importance of learning more about the Hap Road project at the upcoming special meeting in September. I find it pretty concerning that the record found Barnaby's comments important enough to detail, but our own minutes do not. I really hope that you guys reconsider what you are choosing to put in our minutes. We as a public have a right to know what was said. And yes, you can say, oh, but you can, you can always go to the whatever and listen to it. I'm sorry, that's asking way too much of people. In the past, we were able to read what you folks said. Somewhere along the line, you guys made a decision to not do that anymore. And I really hope you reverse that decision. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Ariel Hofer. My husband, Sean Hofer, and I have been the owners of Hofer Meat Company at 300 Hap Road for the past decade. I speak to you this evening as not only a business owner, but also a resident, and thanks to my husband, a Northfield historian. The village has faced numerous challenges throughout the years as the lesser of the 60093. We don't have lakefront property, and until recently, our children had to commute outside the boundaries to attend high school. In short, we have always been Winnebago's stepchild. In spite of this seeming disadvantage, Northfield has always persevered, not as the underdog or even the comfortable corner, whatever that means, but as a bedrock of modern society. Look all around you. We know each other, for better or for worse, but definitely for good. Sean remembers getting a bowl cut at Hair Confidence from Sherry or Zoran. Pam was doing his mom's nails downstairs as an original pre-pandemic mask-wearing woman. Great respect. My sister-in-law and her husband, along with our 3 nieces and nephews, live in the house that my in-laws moved to at 556 Hap Road with their 2 children at the time in 1984. 2 more came along, and for the past 10 years, all 11 of us have lived in Northfield, with the original core going back 40 years. Despite our growing family and the disagreements that come with that, we do agree on one thing, and that's we're all against the roundabout. Sean and I were here last week, and we have one big takeaway as far as pure information. Our representatives have made decisions without consulting their constituents, and in doing so have turned us into a science project for Cook County. Going forward with this decision will put resident and business owners at a severe disadvantage, and our fear is it will not be recognized until it is too late. Understand the faces that you see today are your neighbors. They aren't just people who are up here tonight. These are the people who hold this village up. And let's not spin around too much. I also have in my hand a document that shows my husband was on a steering committee for the Hap Road corridor. It says meeting number 5, and it's dated February 1st, 2011. That date doesn't really make sense for the meetings, but it lists all the people who are involved with the steering committee And the only people who initialed attendance were not residents or business owners. It was people from the village, the county, the engineering. So I want to know who was a part of the steering committee, why my husband was listed here with an email address he never had in 2011, and how this decision actually came to be. I can bring this up.
You're right here. Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, I know it's on. Don Graff, live at the corner of what and why. It's a long story. Want to thank all of you. You guys did a tremendous job at the last meeting. The people you brought in tried their best to explain things. A great job by everybody that showed up too. But I want to do a special thanks to the unsung heroes, those people in the administrative department for greeting and seating all of us upstairs and down. Tremendous job. Oh, hello? Wow. Maybe this thing is not on. Now, let's get in the weeds. Based on some basic research and my notes from last week's meeting, it's become readily apparent to me that we are guinea pigs here. For example, in the last 8 years, Cook County has not approached any other small town to place a roundabout smack dab in the middle of their business district. No other village is currently on a roundabout list. It also appears that at the town hall meetings back in 2016, the county presented a plan filled with sunshine and rainbows. Hey, Northfield, you can be the first village to get your own brand new roundabout. Just sign here. Now, last week, several residents posed questions to the county rep, asking what would happen if the village chose not to include the roundabout in the project. I don't think any one of us received a fully informative answer. I specifically asked, is it true that the county will not approve Hap Road project if it doesn't include a roundabout? The county rep answered, depends. Now, setting aside the fact that to people in their 70s, depends is a noun and not a verb, right? Her response was, to put it mildly, less than constructive, no buts about it. Oh man, tough crowd. I want to ask Patrick to please, the next time you see the county and the engineer reps, please get back to us with a comprehensive answer to that question. I'd really appreciate that. Now in closing, as I've said before, why fix a problem that does not exist? Hap Road is in great shape. Traffic is running smoothly. Downtown businesses are booming. The fine owners, managers, team members, and customers at these enterprises who will be adversely affected by this potential boondoggle deserve to be proactively supported and not in a roundabout way. I ask of this board, early voting, starts next week. Whatever consensus you come to, first and foremost, please do no harm. Thank you.
Anyone else? Anyone else wish to speak? Hearing no one. Approval of minutes, August 20th.
Richard Schwinn, 111 Hap Road. I can't get my head around the idea of children crossing in this roundabout. I think roundabouts are kind of dangerous, and especially in a small town like this. We don't need it, and I certainly don't approve. And it sticks in my mind that for 8 years, I knew nothing about the plans that you guys were doing. And I think that this is a serious flaw in the whole process. Anyway, that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right, moving on. Approval of the minutes, August 20th, 2024. Can I have a motion?
Motion to approve the minutes from August 20th.
Second. Anybody have any comments, corrections? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Next on the agenda, discussion of the draft fiscal year 2023-24 annual comprehensive financial report. Kathleen, do you want to kick this off? I know we have some of our auditors with us.
So our auditor here is Joe, who'll be going over his a brief overview. So I believe his slides are ready to go.
Okay, great. Welcome. Thank you for being here again.
Yeah,
And it's
thank you
good
for
to see
having
you.
me tonight.
Yep.
Thanks. So I'll be going over the draft audit results for fiscal year '24, going through the slides. If you have any questions, feel free to stop me at any time. It'll be at a pretty high level, but feel free to stop me and ask me any questions you have. Okay, so a little bit about the agenda. We'll be going over the 2024 audit deliverables, the audited financial statements, the reporting and insights letter, and then a little bit about the engagement team with their contact information. And while open discussion is at the bottom, like I said, feel free to stop me at any time. So the 2024 audit deliverables, we have the audited financial statements for the year ended April 30th, 2024, performed in accordance with generally accepted auditing standards, and then the reporting and insights from the 2024 audit. For the audited financial statements, we audit the village's financial statements, but we also perform a few non-audit services in that performance of the audit. We help prepare the annual comprehensive financial report. We propose adjusting and conversion journal entries to the village's financial statements to get it kind of from the normal general trial balances that the village presents and shows to the board to the format prescribed by governmental accounting principles. We also prepare the Illinois Comptroller annual financial reports. That's the summary information that goes to the state every year. As far as the audited financial statements go, we once again issued a clean or unmodified opinion on the village's financial statements. It's the highest level of assurance you can gain from your outside auditors. States that the information is reasonable in all material respects and can be reasonably relied upon by an outside user. Really all I have on the financial statements. I wasn't planning on going into any of the actual details of the numbers. Happy to answer any questions related to that. But really, once again, we issued an unmodified opinion, so the financial statements can be used for the purposes intended.
Can you move the mic a little closer, just to make sure that everybody online can hear too? That'd be great.
Sure. Okay, so the reporting and insights letter, this is the letter from Baker Tilly that goes over the auditing standards. It satisfies a few different auditing standards and presents information just generally to that we're supposed to tell those in charge with governance. This letter talks about auditor's responsibility. So the objective of the financial statements is to issue the opinion on the financial statements and also look at internal controls over financial reporting as we prepare our audit procedures. A little bit about management's responsibilities. Your responsibilities are prepare and fairly present the financial statements, to establish and maintain effective internal controls over financial reporting and in compliance with laws and regulations, and also provide us with written representations at the conclusions of the audit. Those representations are included in the draft audit results letter for your information as well. A little bit about the qualitative aspects of the accounting practice. So there were no changes in accounting policies during the year. So if you looked at this year's financial statements compared to last year's, they would be very similar in form and function. Obviously, the numbers would have changed due to the financial results of the year, but no new accounting policies adopted. The accounting estimates used in the preparation of the financial statements were reasonable in relation to the financial statements as a whole. The financial statement disclosures were neutral, consistent, and clear. There were no difficulties in performing the audit. There were no material audit adjustments in the performance of the audit. There's one past adjustment, I'll talk a little bit about it, related to the IMRF actuarial variance. What this means is every year, IMRF has actuary reports prepared that include, they estimate the total pension liability, and then they deduct from that your net position in IMRF, how much the village and the employees have contributed to IMRF, plus how much interest has compounded over the years. That net position component is an estimate. IMRF hasn't been audited yet. They give you an estimate to the actuaries to get those reports out in a timely manner. Then IMRF gets audited eventually. It happens within your time frame, but it's still after the actuary report. There's always a difference between what IMRF presents as estimated net position for the village and their audited net position for the village. The variance there, we consider a past adjustment. We can't really adjust for it in your financial statements. The actuary is not going to go back and use it after the draft has been presented. It's always been immaterial for the village, apologies. So we pass on the adjustment in order to keep the audit moving along and presenting it in with best information available. But we do present that for your information so you can see how big or small that is on an annual basis. We had no disagreements with management, no consultations with other accountants. As I mentioned, the management representation letter is provided for your information. There are no other significant issues discussed, and other audit issues are just discussed in the normal course of business. So really no areas of concern or no kind of red flags within this letter. A little bit about new accounting pronouncements coming up. There's a few accounting pronouncements that will be effective in future years that will help the village prepare for and adjust the financial statements should these pronouncements apply. And then internal control matters. We look at internal controls to help determine the nature, timing, and extent of our audit procedures. We don't provide an opinion on internal controls. That's not what an external audit does. But should anything come to our knowledge that we feel like the board should be aware about, or that's something that could potentially cause a material misstatement in the financial statements, we would include that in this letter. Happy to report that there are no reportable comments for your consideration. As I mentioned, we work for the board. We work with management to prepare the audit, but we ultimately work for the board. Should you have any questions or concerns, not just when I'm up here presenting, but throughout the year, our contact information is up here, but it's also included in the audit results letter that you'll have. Should you have any questions? Now, I know in the past we have gone into executive session to kind of discuss the audit further. If you don't have the desire to do that this year, my contact information is there if you have any questions related to that.
Based on your analysis, is there any reason, in your opinion, that the board should go into closed session, or something that you want to present or discuss with them?
Anything I would have to present would be in the letter. So there's no concerns. It's really a board decision on whether or not the state law allows for you to do that, to discuss these things. And so it's really a board decision. I've presented everything that really we have.
Yeah, Patrick hadn't asked that, I would have too, because we're available to go into closed session if there were something that you'd like to talk outside of management. I've got one other question. Is there, for decades now, we've been a recipient of the highest standard awards, certificates of achievement from GFOA. Any reason you believe that we won't receive that certificate again this year?
I do not. You should receive the certificate again.
Excellent. Any questions from the board? Nobody, huh? This is, thank you. Joe, thank you very, very much, as usual. Yep. Great job on this draft. And I don't know, does our procedure, Kathleen, to see him again when we adopt it? I think this is our only visit with you. Is that correct?
Yep.
Great. Great. Thank you again. Great job.
Thank you.
Yep.
Have a good night.
You too. Kathleen, we have the actuary, correct?
That's correct. Now we have the actuary coming up. I believe, yes, and Todd Schroeder, his slides are now teed up.
Welcome, Todd.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I'm happy to be here, and I appreciate you taking your time to listen to, and certainly piggybacking an audit report with an actuary report is very brave, so thank you for doing that. There's 3 actuary reports we do. 2 of them are related to the police pension fund. What we have here is a presentation that gives you a summary of some of the key information that's in those reports for the police pension fund, and certainly we're happy to delve into any details you have with any questions as we go through this. But we'll just start and kind of go through the information, and then again interrupt me if you have any questions. This first page here has a summary of the results for the year. So most of this presentation we're going to talk about is the funding results for the police pension plan. The other report we do is some accounting results that go into your audit. It's part of your financial statements, so that information you'll see in those financials that were just discussed. But at the very top of this, you'll see a recommended contribution for the current year is coming in just over $1.5 million for the police pension fund. Last year, that number was right at $1.4 million. So we're looking at approximately $140,000 increase year over year in the recommended contribution for the police pension fund. That's about a 9.8% increase. Typically, the way these are calculated, these contributions are calculated if everything works out as expected, so that they'll increase at about 3 to 4% per year on an annual basis. And then each year we measure differences from what's expected, and we'll get into that in a moment and look at that, and that'll cause that number to either go up or down. So last year, your increase in contribution was about 1%. This year, 9.8% over the prior year. The next few items on here, we have stated your fair value of your assets, your actuarial value of assets. So when you see the term actuarial value of assets, what we're doing is looking at investment returns over the last 5 years and smoothing in those impacts over 5 years. And we do not do that for financial statement reporting purposes. We only do that for pension funding purposes. The main concept is to try to smooth out some variances related to market returns, because we know markets can be volatile, and the pension plan is a long-term consideration. So when you see the actuarial value of assets term, that's just a smooth value that has the market value behind it, but it's part of each of the last 5 years of assets. Actuarial liability is the amount of money we would want to have in the pension fund for your members. So right now, there's about $13.5 million in unfunded liability in the pension fund. That leaves you on an actuarial, on a funding basis, at about the same funded percentage last year that you were at, or I'm sorry, this year that you were at last year, right around 66%. The bottom number there, in your financial statements, when you measure funded percentage on a straight market value basis for your assets, you're about 64% funded on a market value basis. On this page, we're just going to go through some of the changes in contribution year over year, quantify some of the things that happened year over year with the contribution. So if you look at that top line, you'll see a recommended, under the recommended contribution column, that first number is an increase of about $45,000. Excuse me, it's about $45,000. That's the expected increase from last year to this year. So if everything else would have worked out exactly as expected, your increase in contribution would have been the $45,000 number that's shown on the top line here. Each of the factors that fall after that, and there's 3 key ones, but each of the factors that fall after that are things we look at and are volatile on a year-to-year basis, and they're items that we measure, and they have an impact on your contribution. First one is that pay increases came in higher than expectation year over year from last year to this year. So this year we're running the valuation with higher than expected pay, which means we're projecting higher pay at retirement for the folks who are retiring, which in turn leads to a higher benefit at retirement as part of this process. The net impact of the pay increases being higher than expected was about a $25,000 to $26,000 increase in the recommendation year over year. Actuarial experience brings in all your demographic changes throughout the year. So this is new hires coming into the fund. This is people retiring or new disabilities, all those kind of movements within your population of fund members and police officers. Your actuarial experience led to a $23,700 increase in the recommended contribution this year. That's primarily due to new hires coming into the fund. There was 3 new hires that came in during the year. 1 person terminated, so you're up 2 active members from the prior year. Whenever somebody new is admitted into the fund, is hired into the village and then admitted into the fund, we start recommending contributions on their behalf throughout their working career. So there were a couple other fluctuations as well that offset each other throughout this process, but that was primarily the new hires coming into the fund in the current year. No assumption changes this year. Investment returns less than expected. This was about a $40,000 increase in the recommended contribution. As I mentioned at the beginning, when we look at investment returns, our focus is really investment returns over a 5-year period and how that impacts this year's contribution. So on a market value basis in fiscal '24, the fund actually got over a 9% return on assets. And so we're taking in a piece of that, and that's more than expected. We're also taking in pieces of each of the last 4 years into our investment return calculation. And again, the idea is to just smooth out that component year over year so we don't see too many fluctuations that follow the fluctuations in the stock markets. So again, that led to an increase of about $43,000 year over year. So net effect, if you get to the bottom line there, again, is about a $140,000 increase in the recommended contribution year over year.
Before you go on, I'm just going to make sure that all the trustees, Joe had a lot there, Todd had a lot there, and I want to make sure everybody understands what the smoothing, even though we had a 9% return, why the investment return was less, just because of the 5-year smoothing, right? I mean, we had, was it, Todd, it was 1% return last year? Is that what we were at? And that
Yeah.
If we hadn't had such a nice return this last 12 months, we would have, the contribution would have been a lot larger. But I want to make sure the trustees don't have any questions about that. When I say the recommended contribution, in addition, because of the lower than anticipated 5-year smooth.
Correct.
Right. Anybody?
Well, it would be good to know the actual rate. Again, I forgot, I'm forgetting, what is it, 6.45?
6.75.
6.75. So
Correct.
that's the anticipated return year after year. So we exceeded that by, several hundred basis points.
Yep.
It does seem counterintuitive, though, that you put a good year on top of 4 and drop 1, so that 5th year before must have been a really good year as well.
I think it's probably right.
Yeah.
You drop 1, and we're taking it, like the last 2 years came in under the 6.75%, so we're taking in pieces of each of those as well as part of this. And we are taking in a piece of what happened this year and the gain and putting them all together as part of the process.
Great. Thanks, Todd.
Yep. Just to give you a quick breakdown, when we make a recommendation for funding, there's 2 things we're really funding for as part of this process. The first one I mentioned earlier with the new hires. For any active member that's in the pension fund, we're recommending that you put aside some money each year of their working career so that the dollars are there when they retire and available to pay their benefits. So when you see the term normal cost, which is in the top line of this chart, that represents those contributions on behalf of active members. What that means basically is if you were 100% funded today, this would represent our entire recommended contribution. So in this valuation of the total $1.5 million in recommended contribution, $400,000 is related to the active members that are in the fund. The remaining amount, the $1.1 million that's seen in that middle column, second row, is a payment towards the unfunded liability. So right now, the funding policy is to try to pay off the unfunded liability over the next 16 years on an increasing basis. And this year's payment towards that unfunded liability is about $1.1 million. So that's dollars that we want in the pension fund. In a sense, it's those dollars from the top line, but from the past that we would expect to have in the pension fund or want to have in the pension fund to be 100% funded. So for anybody who's retired, we would want the whole value of their benefit to be in the pension fund. For anybody who's working, it depends where they're at in their working career. Somebody halfway through their working career, we might want to have half their benefit funded for at that time. And so that's what the liability represents. So again, about $400,000 is related to your continuing regular cost, the annual cost of operating the pension fund, and the $1.1 million is past service cost. We talked earlier about some of the demographic changes in the fund. We've got a little more detail on this page. You had the 3 new members that came in during the year, 1 member who terminated. We've got 24 people who continue to continue to be retired and collect benefits. So we've got all those impacts broken down on this page. We give you a quick breakdown of the age and service distribution. So this is all your members in the pension fund broken down by how old they are and how many years of service that they have. In each box, you'll see 2 numbers. The first number represents Tier 1 members, and the second number represents Tier 2 members. Tier 2 members are anybody who was hired, first hired into the pension fund after January 1, 2011. And they have a different benefit structure than Tier 1 members that came in via the state legislation from 2011. The gray box you see on there is folks who are eligible for retirement. Another thing we like to look at, again, the idea behind funding this pension fund is to be able to make the benefit payments on a going forward basis. Right now, the level of benefit payments is about $1.7 million that come out on an annual basis from the pension fund. In the next 5 years, we're expecting that number to be right around the $2.5 million annual mark. And in the next 10 years, right around $3.1 million in annual benefit payments coming out of the pension fund. So when we talk about funding for the active members or paying down the unfunded liability, this is really the goal, is to get to the point to make sure we can pay these benefit payments. The benefit payment number for 5 years is about a 47% increase over today's levels. For 10 years, it's about an 85% increase over today's levels. So those are just slightly above what we see with our average pension funds that are in that 35 to 40% range for the 5-year number, and right around 70% for the 10-year number, an increase in benefit payments. This factors in retirees, retiree COLAs, so getting increases in retiree benefits, as well as the active population and expectations that somebody could retire and start receiving benefits at some point in the future. All of that is baked into these numbers. We did review this year. One of the assumptions that we review on a local basis is the pay increase assumption, and we like to look at local wage contracts. We looked at local wage contracts, but there was nothing in the first few years that was different from what we were using previously, so we did not update the assumption, but we did take a look at that. I won't go to this in too much detail. This is also in your annual financial report. This is your change in assets year over year. This is where you see the 9.17% rate of return that you got on a fair market value of your assets year over year. So that's above expectations. And your assets increased about $2.1 million in the police pension fund year over year. A couple quick risk management things we look at and things we like to report. One is the fair value of assets. Right now at about, and when I say right now, this is April 30th, 2024. Your fair value of assets at about $25.6 million. The amount of dollars we want to have put aside for the retired members and members in payment status in the pension fund by itself is about $26.9 million. So the assets are just under, right now, the amount of money we want to have put aside just for the retired members of the pension fund. It's close, but just under. The second thing we like to look at in here is the ratio of your benefit payments to your assets. So how much of the fund are you paying out on an annual basis? Right now that number is about 6.52%. Our average pension fund is just under 8%, and that's a good place to be in. You want to be, the lower that number, the better. What that means is more of your assets can stay invested, less money is held liquid to make benefit payments. And so if that number gets, we usually say like in the 8 to 12% range, it's kind of a warning range, and then for our funds that get above 12%, we consider that the high-risk range, and you risk losing investment returns because you're holding cash to make those benefit payments. Everything so far I've talked about is with the hope of funding the plan by in 16 years at 100% funded level. That is our recommendation. That represents what we feel is appropriate recommendations under actuarial standards of practice, funding policy doctrines that are out there. GFOA, the Government Finance Officers Association, recommends 100% funding. However, the state of Illinois does not require 100% funding as part of this. So this has been, up to this slide, has been our recommended contribution. State of Illinois requires at this time for you to be 90% funded by 2040 as part of this process. There's some discussion of moving that back, and they've moved it back in the past. It was 100% by 2020, 90% by 2033, 90% by 2040. That's where they're at right now. This contribution here, this alternative contribution, is the contribution that represents the 90% funded by 2040 target. What that means is 10% of your liability that you have in the pension fund right now, those dollars we want to have put aside to make benefit payments, is pulled out and ignored for purposes of determining that amortization payment. The net effect, the statutory minimum, is about between 1.1 and 1.2 million for the current year. We like to look real quick too. This is a governance, planned governance chart. This is in the report we do for your financial statements, and the report requires us to do some projections to see if the fund's going to be solvent going forward. And part of the basis of that is how have the contributions been coming in over the past 5 years based on our recommendation. And as you can see on this chart, every year has been 100% except for fiscal 23, which was actually 120% of our recommendation that went in. What that means when we do your financial statement reporting, we project the fund to be fully solvent because our contribution recommendation is to fund 100%, and more than 100% of that recommendation is being made over time. So it puts you in the best position in terms of how this liability shows on the financial statements. And this is a picture of that position. So the Government Accounting Standards Board, for purposes of reporting in your financial statements, asks us to run a projection of solvency for your pension fund. Now, it's not a true projection of solvency that you might ask for if you were curious about it. This is specific to the GASB rules, meaning we assume nobody new is going to be hired in the future. They want to look at the closed group, even though we know that people will be hired in the future, and that'll affect everything related to the pension fund. So the black line on here represents your assets. Year one is today, so you're sitting there at about 23 million in assets. We would expect, based on the contributions that have been made in the past, expected investment returns, and then benefit payments being made out, that your fund will increase for a while and then decrease over time until you get out 80 years and you've paid the last person that's today exists in the pension fund. And again, this goes to zero because this is a closed group. And so that's acceptable to go to zero as long as the last member has been paid. If you were contributing less than 100% of the recommendation to the pension fund, you'd see this chart end somewhere earlier in, let's say, the 40 to 45 year range, and it would affect your financial statement reporting negatively. And then actuarial disclaimers is at the end. Any questions on the information?
With pension consolidation and us not being in control of our investments anymore because of the police and fire pension consolidations, where does that fall into your actuarial evaluation as far as the rates of return, since you really don't have control of that anymore since it's being invested by a different group now?
Good question. So what we do each year is we look at the investment policy statement for the consolidated board. So the Illinois Police Officers Pension Investment Fund issues an investment policy statement, and we can look at the target asset allocation in that investment policy statement. What we do then is we review a chart that has 35 different investment advisors on there running long-term capital market projections, and we try to determine a reasonable range of where expected asset returns could come in. And if your rate of return, 6.75%, falls in that range, then we're comfortable with it, and it does fall within the reasonable range. If it fell outside the range, then we would put a caveat in this report. But it is information that we do review on an annual basis to make sure that the expected rate of return on your assets is matched up with the investment policy and the capital market projection information that's available.
Do you guys have any concerns with the pension consolidation as far as their investments and how they're handling the fund?
I wouldn't say I have any concerns, but I'm also not necessarily qualified to talk about investment policy or things like that. It's outside my area of expertise. But you know, everything they're doing, I know, is online and transparent with it. But I'm definitely not an investment expert.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Go ahead, Matt. Go ahead first.
If you could share, what percentage of your clients do the 90% funding versus the 100% or more, if you know and if you can share?
Yeah, right now, somewhere north of 80% of our clients do the 100% funding target. And it's part of the reason our clients hire a private actuary is to get that 100% funding number and to get the the number that's not caveated because it falls below certain standards in the actuarial standards of practice. So we still do have some clients that are doing 90%. Some are doing something in between, maybe trying to work their way from 90% up to 100%, but 4 out of 5 are doing the 100% contribution.
What about over 100%? What about over 100%?
Over 100%? That's a good question. I think on a regular annual basis, we're seeing close to 100% with a lot of funds. They might go a little bit over, a little bit under. We have seen not this past year, but before this past year when interest rates were very low, we did see a rush of folks issuing pension bonds and putting a bunch of money in. So you get a giant number in 1 year in terms of the percent compared to our recommendation. But generally speaking, it's around that 100% number.
I think this is more for the board. Just seeing that number go from 1.5 to 3 million in 10 years is a pretty substantial increase. And I think as we look at the budget, I think we have to be mindful. I don't know if we're going to get 9% return. You know, it's predicated on a 6.75% return. So I think we're going to have to be mindful of stepping up. You know, a 1% increase is nothing. We should always be shooting higher because that's going to be a big part of our budget very soon.
I would hope that future boards will look to making contributions, excess contributions, if they, the conditions of the budget allows it. I know that helped us, what, 2 years ago? 2 years ago? 3 years ago?
Yeah, fiscal '23.
Yeah.
Yep.
Any other questions from the board? Todd, as usual, a great job.
Thank you. Appreciate your time.
Thank you very much. Yep. We have a little time here. We may go to executive session. Is that,
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion that we adjourn to closed session for the purposes of discussing the employment, discipline, performance, or dismissal of specific employees.
Holly?
Second.
Need a second.
Second.
Thank you. Holly, could you call the roll?
Trustee Orth?
Yes.
Trustee Whitaker?
Yes.
Trustee Fowler?
Yes.
Trustee Nendrick? Yes. Trustee Gallen?
Yes.
Trustee Dungus?
Yes.
Again, we'll be back in time for our regular board meeting. Thank you.